Buenos dias. My name is Michelle Messina. I'm from Silicon Valley, and I want to welcome you to this panel and to the sauna that we're sitting in today, because it's like a sauna. And I want to introduce Fernando Paiz. We're going to talk a little bit about startup ecosystems. So I'm just going to take 3 or 4 minutes and tell you a little bit about Silicon Valley, because that's where I come from. Silicon Valley is a very unique ecosystem, and we have kind of all the things that you might need to build your company there, whether it be different types of capital, early stage, late stage, corporate venture capital. We have mentors, this culture of mentorship and sharing best practices and methodologies and things like that. We also have, it's easier to get connected to a corporation if you're an early stage startup, because most corporations at one point in time were little teeny startups. Google just celebrated their 25th birthday last week. So what I want to share with you just briefly is that even though we still have all the pieces of the ecosystem in Silicon Valley, it's still really hard to be a founder. It's still really hard to raise capital. It's much easier to find best practices and methodologies. And so I've worked all over the world. I've worked in about 65 countries around the world, and I've worked all through Latin America, y habla español. And I want to share with you that every place has components of an ecosystem. It's just the level of maturity, the level of readiness of the founders, and that sort of thing that can take an ecosystem from, the sort of beginning levels to the next levels.
Thank you, Michelle. As Michelle was saying, you can see an ecosystem from the actor's point of view or from the interactions, and that's a key. I would like to ask you, what are you doing here? Are you interacting, or do you listen to the people sitting in front of you? Because if you are not interacting, you are not becoming a part of the ecosystem in Guatemala, of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Guatemala. So facilitating this interaction is not easy. It's not easy because you have entrepreneurs that have some goals, some objectives. You have venture capitals that have different goals, different attitudes, different values. You have institutions like university. I am from Universidad Valle de Guatemala, and we are trying to contribute to that ecosystem, to facilitate this interaction. But it's not easy. So being with Michelle is great because she knows very well about how Silicon Valley works. And it's not easy, and you don't do it in one day. And being here is very important because Volcano Summit is one of the few spaces that we have in Guatemala in which you can find a university, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, governmental offices like the mayor of La Antigua. Hopefully, I would like to see more of that here, but it's not easy. So first, take advantage of Volcano Summit and interact. That's the purpose of the summit.
Yeah, I think that the interaction is really important. I do talks about ABCs of Silicon Valley, attitudes, beliefs, and culture of Silicon Valley. And one thing that I've noticed is that we're very, very open and very willing to collaborate with anybody and everybody that comes to Silicon Valley. So it doesn't matter what country you come from, what language you speak. If you speak English as your second or third language, con un acento, it doesn't really matter. We don't really care because the doors are kind of always open for anybody and everybody in Silicon Valley. There's 120 different languages and dialects spoken in Silicon Valley, so there's people from everywhere. And unfortunately, I've only met one entrepreneur from Guatemala in all the 20 years I've been in Silicon Valley. I've met entrepreneurs from every other country, but only one time from Guatemala. I think that, so openness and collaboration is really important, and the other thing that's super important is trust. So starting from a position of trust when you first meet someone, rather than a position of distrust, desconfianza, it makes things go a lot faster, a lot easier, more efficient, and it's more fun when we're sharing what our goals and objectives are to do business, to collaborate, et cetera. The other thing I'll point out is that things move super fast in Silicon Valley. So, you know, if somebody emails you something, if you don't respond within 24 hours to that message, they're going to think you're not interested, and they're going to move on. So we all suffer from FOMO, from fear of missing out, and that's a big kind of cloud over Silicon Valley. So we're always trying to connect and access the latest information, the coolest startup, the most interesting founder, that sort of thing, because we do have anxiety about missing out.
I'm following on that. You have to be careful about which ecosystem you are looking at. For example, being a volcano, meaning that the ecosystem you want to work in is based on tech and high growth. Not all the ecosystems in Guatemala promoting entrepreneurship are based on that. You can find an ecosystem very strong in Guatemala that is social oriented. And it has virtues and it has problems. But if you get into that ecosystem, the actors will be different, the way they interact will be different, and the results you will get are different. So trying to understand that's why silicon is important for you, because that's a tech ecosystem. And Volcano is a tech ecosystem. You can focus on different areas, but basically it's tech. And tech is not easy, because it has to be connected with another ecosystem that is called the innovation ecosystem. It's not the same, the innovation ecosystem, that the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Not all innovators are entrepreneurs, and not all entrepreneurs are innovators. So what is the purpose of the university being here? Basically, we believe we are a tech university. Therefore, our first objective is to build an innovation ecosystem. The second objective is to have an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it's not very easy to work both ways, because it takes a lot of resources, a lot of effort. I mean, building these 3 days is tough. It's complicated. Inviting people, coordinating, takes money, and it's not easy.
So speaking of not easy, being an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley is super hard. 90% of startups in Silicon Valley fail within 5 years. So if you go to Silicon Valley, you meet entrepreneurs, there's a high probability that if you come back in a few years, those companies won't be around in that state. But let me ask you a question, what your impression is. Y Combinator in Silicon Valley is probably the top tier accelerator in the world. It's produced Airbnb and Stripe and, I mean, just many great tech companies. And I'm always curious about the headquarters of a lot of those startup companies. And so I'm doing a lot of work on the innovation ecosystem in Panama, so I looked up companies there. I looked up Costa Rica, Nicaragua, lots of different companies. I could not find any companies from Guatemala that have applied to or successfully been accepted to Y Combinator. What is your impression or comment about why there are no companies that have gone to that top tier digital accelerator?
That's a tough question, because I will say there are Guatemalans that are doing that, but not Guatemalan companies doing that. And basically the problem is that Guatemalan, which is very different than Costa Rica and Panama, is very unstable in different areas. Politically, we have, the economy is stable, but it's not growing enough. So Guatemala City is where the concentration of resources and economic activity is, which creates a lot of noise around the country. So when you want to grow a company, these issues doesn't help. And they become challenges additionally to the venturing that you are trying to set up. You go to Costa Rica, you go to Panama, even being smaller countries, they are more effective handling those issues. So it's more welcoming. And that's a challenge we have here in Guatemala. That's the way it is.
That's interesting. What else do you think, since you've been here and you understand the culture, the language, et cetera, what's in your impression, what works really well here and what doesn't work really well here?
What works here? Guatemalans. I mean, there is no other country in which the intent to be an entrepreneur is higher.
Okay.
We are top 10 in intention to become an entrepreneurs. That's great. Other countries are trying to work very hard to develop entrepreneurial intentions. We don't have that problem. So the seed is there. Obviously, some of the seeds go to surviving, not to growth, not to technology.
Of course.
And just a reminder, only 1% of Guatemala go to the university. Let's say that you want to build a tech company. You have to have certain basic skills if you want to do that. Yeah. Otherwise, you will have entrepreneurial intention, you will have a venture, but the value added that you will be generating is so small that that's what you get back. Remember what they say, you want to build a $2 billion company, you have to solve a 2 billion people problem. And if you're thinking too small, that's the way. And that's the challenge we have.
A number of years ago, probably 12 or 13 years ago, Startup Chile started. And what they did basically was come to Silicon Valley and scout entrepreneurs to come to Chile because they wanted to change the entrepreneurial mindset and the culture in Chile. So they were cherry picking companies from Silicon Valley. And then the second year, they opened it up to everybody worldwide. So I've been on the board of Startup Chile for a couple years. And the thing they say is that it really has changed the mindset of people all through Chile, not just tech entrepreneurs that want to go there and do a pilot or a proof of concept, but it's also changed the mindset of the farmers that ship a lot of products to the rest of the world, whether it be fruits or nuts or wine or lo que sea. But they said it's really done a lot to change the mindset in Chile. Do you think that a program like that might work here? Do you think the digital nomad visas that so many countries are doing would work here? Do you think startupguatemala.com would be an idea that would help more entrepreneurs take the risk to start a company?
I think that we have tried stuff like that because Startup Chile was also replicated in Colombia, for example, with certain success. Universities got involved with that. A lot of VCs came to Colombia. So it is feasible. But for example, in Chile, because of the political situation, now a lot of people is pulling back. The same with Colombia. So it is difficult. For example, we went to Israel. And you go to what they call the innovation, it's called the Innovation Authority. And the director is talking to us saying that he has a $500 million budget.
Wow.
And we ask, for what?
For what?
For what? and he says, 500 million only for investing in new ventures. And the first question is, you are a government officer, you are going to invest in new ventures, you know that from 10, you are going to have only one that is successful. How do you explain that to the president, to the prime minister, that you're going to, lose 90% of the 500 million you got? And he said, you don't get it. You don't get it. 90% of those failures are the seed for the next failures, for the next failures, and then for the success.
So serial entrepreneurs, they're
Exactly.
developing serial entrepreneurs.
Exactly, and we are learning. Sometimes they'll develop some technology, they launch the venture, they fail, but other entrepreneur gets why they fail, and he tries something different, and that's the way we work. And everybody understands that here in Israel.
But that's an expensive education program, don't
Very
you think?
expensive. Very expensive, but it works. Now Israel is top 10, being a little country, really a little country with no more than 5 top 10 universities. So you can do it. But basically, I mean, coming back to the ecosystem, to me, the ecosystem has to be driven by the entrepreneurs. This is what I like a little bit what we do here in Volcano Summit. Most of the stuff you see is driven by entrepreneurs, not by government, not by university. We are very bad for that. I mean, we can do some stuff, but it doesn't work very well. But basically, entrepreneurs are the ones telling everybody what is important. And that's good.
But the entrepreneurs don't have any money. So how should entrepreneurs...
Some don't have any money.
Okay, well, let's just say entrepreneurs as a rule don't have any money, right? So how should they advocate for the development of their ecosystem and to whom? Here in Guatemala, for example.
Well, first thing, if you go around, if you go out of the door, you will find at least 20 to 25 VCs. So money is there. The question is, do I understand as an entrepreneur what they want? Most entrepreneurs don't. It's not something that I say. The evidence says. Entrepreneurs don't understand what venture capital wants or angel investors want. They go and they think that the point of meeting a VC or an angel is money. And for the angel and the VC, it's not about money. But it's a little bit about money, but they have a strategy. They have certain areas they want to impact. They have certain structure into the VC that you have to understand. So training, I will say, Michelle, is very important. Being an entrepreneur is not only about solving the problem and being good at solving the problem. It's also understanding how the system works, what is the structure, if you are getting money, how do you get money? What does this getting money implies to you? And what are you going to do about it? And for that, you need a framework. You do the company. Usually, you will have a team. 40% of the problems of entrepreneurs are the team. Not the money, not Guatemalan politics, leading the team. That's a problem. They don't get training on that.
And they don't know how investors make money. They don't understand how investors are compensated, how, like you said, certain sectors, certain levels of maturity. Most investors in Silicon Valley won't invest in a company with just one founder. They want the power of 2 or the power of 3, because it's just like your mom says, 2 heads are better than 1 to solve a problem, right? And they feel the same way for entrepreneurs.
Michelle, and you were telling me a couple of days ago, just the concept of having a viable product and pivoting on the product. We don't have that mindset. We get stuck with the product we have, and we say we have to go with it until we die. And we don't pivot. We are not good for getting feedback, understand the feedback, reframe the solution, go back again, reframe the solution, go back again, reframe the solution, go back again. We are very bad for that. We stick with what we want. And that requires some training. And you were telling me the importance of that, because this is one of the reasons new ventures fail. They stick with the first solutions they have.
Yeah, and the whole idea of experimenting and trying, exactly what you're doing, what you're saying, try something, it doesn't work, then try something again. So the understanding that being an entrepreneur has inherent risk, with risk comes failure. The whole process of taking a risk is experimentation. And the first thing we put out in the market is usually not the best thing, and to have the privilege of being able to pivot to something new is definitely a privilege, because you could have gotten to the point of the market saying, I'm not going to buy your product stinks, and you think, oh my God, I'm out of business. But in reality, if you still have time, people, money, resources to continue, then how do you pivot, and what is the mindset for pivoting? So the whole try again, and hopefully succeed, and the experimentation process is really, really important. And that's the difference that I see in Silicon Valley versus the rest of the world. Most people in the rest of the world think there's only one attempt, there's only one version of the product, and I only have one chance at building my company either successfully or unsuccessfully. And let's face it, it's going to be unsuccessful the majority of the time, because 90% of companies fail in 5 years in Silicon Valley, and in Colombia and Brazil, it's much higher. It's like 94, 95%. But it's hard being an entrepreneur. It really is. And you've got to help people understand that experimentation is a really big part of trying to find product market fit. It's critical. And so we need to understand that we have to kind of embrace this attitude of experimentation and risk-taking.
So if you want to interact with people, focus on why they failed. And if they tell you they haven't failed, don't waste your time.
Should we ask a couple questions, see if anybody has some questions?
Do you have questions?
¿Preguntas?
Atrévanse, hombre. Vamos.
Somebody has to be the first one to ask a question.
Why do you think it's called an ecosystem? What is an ecosystem? Why they say entrepreneurial ecosystem? Basically, eco means like a home. And in a home or a space, they live a lot of actors, and they interact. And it's an ecosystem because system means it's complex. What's the problem with complex? Let's say that we decide with Michelle, yeah, a good way will be to teach product viability. And how?
Okay.
Yeah, and how does it work? And you set it up. There is no cause and effect. Because we do that, because we train people, it doesn't mean that in a month the problem is solved. It doesn't work that way. It's a complex system. So you will see the results after a lot of interactions. And if you ask government, that's why government doesn't like entrepreneurship. Because it's very difficult to have objectives, to have results, to show. Imagine the guy in Israel. We did a good job. We lose $450 million this year, but we got 50. Yeah.
That was our KPI.
So you have to be able to really explain why and why this is good for the ecosystem. And that's important. But it's about failure, really, and understanding and growing.
So the most important thing that I see for successful entrepreneurs is those that are willing to accept coaching, that know they don't know everything, and that build a network of mentors, advisors, coaches. You know, a coach is somebody who comes in to help you do a specific thing, like learn to pitch. And a mentor or an advisor has a much longer-term picture of
Thank you, Michelle. That's a great comment. Why is a great comment? Because as some of you may know, the university was lucky enough to have a grant of $15 million from MIT to develop the innovation ecosystem and the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And the first project we picked, because if you go to MIT, they have like 15 units related to entrepreneurship and innovation. But the one we choose to start is mentoring. And they explained to us why mentoring was key. So we are developing a program. In fact, we are launching the program in a couple of weeks. And we are having mentors from MIT coming here, and we have 15 mentors in Guatemala, and they will be trained as mentors because it's so important for them. and entrepreneurs will grow because of that. So being a mentor is key, and it's part of the ecosystem, and we believe that's a good way to start. So we are very eager to start that program.
Congratulations, that's awesome. The other thing I want to point out is not only do entrepreneurs have to find their customers, build their product, and have product market fit, but they themselves need to be good business leaders, business owners. They need to understand how to improve processes, their timelines, things like that. So they, as a human being, have to develop their own skill set, not just lead their teams and try to figure out why their customer is buying or not buying their product. So there's a lot of self-development to be a good entrepreneur as well.
Yes, and because of that, you need discipline. For example, if we are 3 entrepreneurs, and as an entrepreneur, when you start the business, everybody is doing everything. That's the way it works.
And everybody is involved in the decisions in the beginning.
It's involved in the decision, but that doesn't mean that because we 3 are doing all this stuff, there is no one responsibility. So I know that Michelle is in charge of marketing, even knowing that everybody is doing marketing. I know that Fernando will be responsible for finance, even though we know that everybody is doing finance. I know that Johanna is doing operations, and she's responsible, but we are all doing operations. So that discipline, that way to manage is not obvious to everybody. And you start having fights among the team and not focusing, and not being responsible, not showing results for what, so it becomes more difficult.
The last thing I'll say about decision making is that I have met lots of teams in Latin America through all the countries I've worked in, and they all say, well, there's 3 of us, we all have an equal share ownership in the company, and we set aside shares that are going to be available to our employees later on. But when we disagree on something, we should all have a consensus decision on what happens. And I always tell them, everybody has input on the decision that needs to be made in the company, but at some point in time, you have to have a structure for how you decide, and it does not have anything to do with ownership shares in the company. It has to do with who holds the functional responsibility to make sure the financials are up to snuff, or the marketing campaign was successful or was not successful. And so you have to understand how you're going to make decisions in the company, especially if there's more than 2 founders. So once it becomes an odd number of founders, things get more complicated. But you have to have a decision structure so that everybody is like, okay, I gave my 2 cents worth, I don't agree, but I get on board and I'm going to help and do what I need to do.
Okay, I think we're
we
done.
have time for one question. I guess my comment would be, everywhere I go, I see super smart entrepreneurs. And I've talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs here, super smart people. Israel does not build companies and develop products for the Israeli market. They're very clear about that. They're building it for the rest of the world, and usually the US is where they're building it for. And I see the same thing. I've worked in Moldova and a bunch of other really tiny countries, and these entrepreneurs are building products for other markets. So I think Guatemala has the same opportunity and advantage.
And we have good examples.
Venture-backed company. Why would I stay in Guatemala if I end up having a Delaware company
maybe you, so
But maybe with an example.
he's telling us time's up. So we'll finish
up.
this and then we'll be done. Go ahead, go ahead.
No, I think our time's up. Well, you know Tata. What is the competitive advantage of Tata? Zero. We don't have, I mean, the raw materials. We get everything from China. We get, I mean, the cost of labor is twice as any Asian like China. We don't compete on that too. So why Tata is growing and is incredibly successful? But it's an example of why you have to focus on the international market, something of what you are saying. I mean, why is he here if the international market is the focus of Tata? I don't know the answer, but it works. I mean, he's doing a good job.
There's nothing wrong with a US headquartered company in the tech space with their developers here. Absolutely nothing wrong. I have a friend in Lima, Peru. He has 250 developers. It's headquartered in the US, and his whole team is in Peru except for his salespeople. So bringing that revenue back to Peru is important for him, for those employees. So anyway, we got to finish. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Michelle.
Gracias.